Well, President Obama fires back at critics of his refugee resettlement plans. The administration plans to accept 10,000 people in the next year. He and his supporters say it's the right thing to do. Some critics, though, say the president's program and his defense of it are anything but moral. Here's a sample from The American Interest. To think that conspicuous moral posturing and holy posing over a symbolic refugee quota could turn President Obama from the goat to the hero of the Syrian crisis is absurd. Wringing your hands while Syria turns into a hell on earth and then taking in a token number of refugees can be called many things, but decent and wise are not among them. The author of those words joins us now, Walter Russell Mead, professor of humanities and foreign policy at Bard College and editor-at-large for The American Interest. It's an imperfect analogy, but you say that President Obama is essentially closing the barn door after all of the horses have run out in Syria.
Well, you know, if humanitarian concern for refugees in Syria was really driving President Obama's policy, he would have done something to stop this problem from happening in the first place. He would have listened to many of his advisors who said that providing safe havens for them in Syria was the way out. His own inaction has created this humanitarian disaster.
He said there was a red line, and when the red line was crossed, there was essentially no reaction.
Historians are not going to look at President Obama's record in Syria and say this is an example of the way American foreign policy ought to be done.
But he says, just be patient. My policy is working. Give it some time.
Well, we've given it plenty of time already, but so far not a lot of success.
Another line that you wrote, why is there a Syrian refugee crisis in the first place? Obama's own policy decisions, allowing Assad to convert peaceful demonstrations into an increasingly ugly civil war, refusing to declare safe havens and no-fly zones were instrumental in creating the Syrian refugee crisis. This crisis is in large part the direct consequence of President Obama's decision to stand aside and watch Syria burn.
That's certainly my view. Certainly my view.
I'm going to say you're not winning any friends at the White House with this kind of language.
It's actually interesting how many senior Democrats and former Obama officials would agree with much of what I've said in that piece.
And you hear from them?
Well, one does. One does. People have. You'll hear from people in the government that they're not happy with this, but it's no secret. People have made public statements. President Obama's former ambassador to Syria, Ambassador Ford, has been very critical.
So when the president lectures Republicans and some Democrats in Congress who are in opposition to his process to bring some 10,000 Syrian refugees here, do you think the protest is misguided?
Look, let's begin by saying that we've had Syrian Americans in this country for well over 100 years, and many of them are among some of our most loyal and successful citizens. So the idea that Syrians are somehow bad for the United States or can't be good Americans is crazy, and that needs to be said. But I think what President Obama is trying to do is, where the government has been so unable to control the border on the south, to deal with people's concerns about infiltration, security, to suddenly turn around and say, I'm a really moral person for letting Syria go down the tubes and go up in flames, and you're an immoral person for not helping me look good in front of the world press. I think that is cynical, and I think it's sad.
It's in the American interest. Walter Russell Mead, thank you.
Thank you.